Well, look at you. You found us again, and thank you for that. This is live from my office. And again, the buddy system here. If you have someone that doesn't know how to download a podcast, someone you can help, please help them. It will make their life more fulfilling. We do live from my office at least a couple of times a week. Occasionally there's bonus episodes, and the way you don't miss a single episode is to subscribe. Wherever you're listening right now, on whatever platform you've chosen, you can leave a comment about this show, but you can also always get live from my office. So that buddy system, as you're taking care of a friend, a neighbor, helping them survive the times in which we live in this insane year of 2020, they need you to download my podcast. So help a friend, help a neighbor. It's an older person down the street. Sure, when the snow starts flying in a few months, you could shovel their driveway, but you might hurt yourself. If you download the podcast for them, they won't even notice the snow. So get after it, help others. Let's make Live from My Office something that everyone can engage in and engage with. It'll be therapeutic. Won't it? I don't know, but it's worth a shot. On today's Live from My Office, my friend Pat McGann is a funny dude. Funny dude. He's been opening for Sebastian Maniscalco, who's certainly the hottest comic in the country. The guy's selling out states at this point. And Pat McGann's got a brand new comedy special just out a month or so ago. And it's produced by Sebastian Maniscalco. Oh, you know what? Why am I talking about it? How about a preview?
I want you to give a huge round of applause for Mr. Pat McGann.
This is tough being married with kids, right? But no one tells us. We just line up and do it. You know how many bachelor parties I was at? They brought a stripper? That's stupid. They should bring out a guest speaker. When's Mom gonna be home? That's a big one I get. Don't you think I'm wondering the same thing? How about this? When I start paying attention to you, she's close. We got stuff from the Bible hanging up in our house. We're Catholic. We don't even do the Bible. We got Old Testament sayings. Perhaps this is the moment you were created for. She hung that up in our bathroom. Really? This is what I was created for? To take a dump and scroll Twitter?
Pat McGann on today's show. Also, an old friend of mine, Ed Mann, is just one of the great people that I've had the pleasure to know in my life. We came up in radio together. And then one day, he put down his jazz clarinet, which was good because when he ever had that in his mouth, I could barely understand him. And he said, "I've fallen in love, and I'm going to get married to Don Rickles' daughter, Mindy." My wife and I were invited to the wedding, which we gladly went to. We sat with the Newharts, one of the great thrills. Had a chance to see Milton Berle, have a word with him in the hallway. He actually claimed I was his illegitimate son when his wife came over to join in on the conversation. Larry King was walking around to every table saying, "Hello, I'm Larry King." "Hey, Larry, we know who you are." And it was nothing but fun, as you can imagine. And Don Rickles there to do the toast, which, of course, none of it I could repeat here. And Mindy herself is a fabulous comedian, and she'll be on this podcast too. But the point of all of this is my friend Ed Mann went from being a really good disc jockey, which he'd never admit to being management. And he shot his way to the top in management, internationally famous, and made himself a whole boatload of money, frankly, much more money than I was making at the time. And he's still in the business, and he's doing some podcasting as well. So why am I talking to him on a show? Well, because I can, because it's my show. And also because he's got a book out. He's got a book out about radio, and neither one of us would have anything in our lives without radio. Well, we'd have family and we'd have our children, but we'd be desperately poor, and no one would talk to us, and we certainly wouldn't have you listening to this podcast. So Pat McGann and Ed Mann are on the show, and if we find a third guest to rhyme, I'll put them on too. Remember, you got to subscribe to Live from My Office, and I hope you will. Don't forget to drop me an email at thecochronshow@gmail.com as well. Apple Electronics gift cards for anybody that wants to throw me not one, not two, but three names and emails of your friends. I'll make the connection with them, send them a sample of the show. You include your name and address, and for helping us build this audience, I will send you a gift card from our friends at Apt Electronics. All of this, as always, is sponsored by our title sponsor, David Hochberg and Team Hochberg. We'll come back in a moment with Pat McGann. I'm Steve Cochran. I really want to thank you for being here, and this is Live from My Office. It is always a great deal of thanks that we owe to David Hochberg and Team Hochberg for being the primary sponsors, the presenting sponsors of Live from My Office. Mr. Hochberg joins me now. Hello, David.
Hey, Steve, how are you?
I'm doing fine, and I understand you're busier than ever.
Yeah, it's rates are still at record lows, and
it's bananas.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it really is bananas. We just quoted 75-year-old couple in Indiana. We did a cash-out refinance, cleaned up all their debt, paid off like 40, 50 grand worth of debt 6-7 months ago, and they're at the point where you're able to refinance them again. You have to wait 180 days before you can refinance them. Their credit scores are up 80 points, and we're going to save them another, I think, $250 a month. They elected to roll their costs in, and we got them a rate of like 3%. So on a 30, it's insane.
That's bananas.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's great. It's great that all the listeners are able to take advantage of these low rates, because the two quickest ways to get money back in the economy, Steve, number one, federal government dropping money right into your checking account. There's none faster than that. And number two, lowering interest rates and allowing homeowners and real and property owners to drop their interest rates down, because that's a long-term effect, right? That's every month. So, yeah, hopefully all this money that everybody's saving and all the debt everybody's paying off will get back into the economy, where get the economy going again and get some people back to work.
All right, David Hochberg, great talking to you as always. And again, it's Team Hochberg, and it's 855-56-DAVID or 56david.com, the title sponsor of this Live from My Office. This is Live from My Office, and my friend Pat McGann is one of the funniest comics in the country, and now the rest of the country is really realizing it. He's got a special that's out this summer that you can get on demand, and he'll eventually be back on stage, and as all great comedians will, and some average comedians too. And he joins me now. Hi, Pat.
Steve, how are you, man?
Great to talk to you again. First off, let's talk about your family. You got beautiful kids. You got this beautiful wife, and are you allowed in the house at this point, or are they used to having you on the road and they want you gone?
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for saying that. You have a beautiful family as well, buddy. Yeah, it's good. It's good. They are probably a little bit tired of me being around, because I was, traveling so much, and now I'm a constant presence, and the order of things have shifted. I realize that I have to face the problems and issues. I used to just be like, you know what, I can deal with this because I'm going to be leaving in a couple of days. So now it's like, oh my God, I actually have to parent. I can't run from my problems anymore.
Right. Well,
pretend.
Have you made this mistake? Because when I commuted to do radio shows, I also, would tour a little bit doing stand-up, and I made the mistake a couple of times, and it was only twice, when I would come home after being gone for, a couple of weeks, and I'd go, well, what are we doing it this way for? Oh, don't question the commander at the house. Not a good idea.
No, exactly. Yeah, I used to just come in and just roll with the vibe and then be gone again. Now it's the order of things is, I can kind of like dictate a little bit more now that I'm a presence, but certainly can relate to that. Like, don't come in here and try to rock the boat. We have a system. Right. You're not part of it.
Right. You will follow orders and you will get along. And if you do not, you won't be here.
Exactly.
All right. So tell me about the kids. How old are they now?
They are 8, 7, and 5.
It's crazy.
And I have all that down now. I know the ages. I know their names. I'm much more aware.
Now
they're back in school too, so that's I'm hoping that lasts.
Is this homeschooling or do they go somewhere?
No, they're going in.
Oh, they are?
They go to a Catholic school, Steve, and the Catholics...
You're showing up.
we are just going. We're leaning on the prayer. I told them when you do the morning prayer, you better do it. You better really mean it. When they stop at the Our Father, you go into a Hail Mary. You don't wrap it up. Keep praying.
So are you like the Belichick of prayer coaches? Is that what this is?
Yes. Yeah, I'm trying to get them fired up because you know what? I'm happy they're in school. They need it. They need to be around their friends. But, I mean, it's funny to see them taking their temperature outside the building because I know it looks scientific, but I'm not sure it really means anything. They're like taking their temperature and then they're asking them questions like, were you at Sturgis?
Well, they weren't, were they?
No.
Okay. I just thought maybe the 8-year-old took the motorcycle.
They have been out riding their bikes, but they have not gone to the Dakotas.
All right, so they're great. Your family's great. We all got to get through this together. But in the meantime, folks getting your special, I think, is one of the best things they can do because there's positives to this stuff that have kind of been revealed in weird ways. But it's been a on-demand comedy boom because everybody's home, and because everybody's been home for so long. A lot of these specials have been really gone a little nuts. And where do we get yours, and what's it called?
So it's called When's Mom Gonna Be Home? And we named it before the pandemic, as you could tell, because now it's like, when is Mom not going to be home?
Right.
When is Dad not going to be home?
Right.
We put it out at the end of July. It's on Amazon. You can find it on YouTube. It's on Apple TV. It's kind of streaming everywhere. And you know what? I felt a little strange about it coming out during this time because it doesn't seem like the most appropriate time to be like, hey, here's my comedy. But it is a good distraction, I think. And I hope that people can still relate to the material. I think it holds up, even though it was taped before all of this. Gotten a good response on it. And, when you think about releasing a comedy special in July, you kind of are like, why are we putting this out in July? Everyone's so distracted. But you're right. Now it's a different time, and people are home, and people are streaming stuff. And
well, they're literally working their way through everything they could possibly stream. So that's just one of the reasons it's great to have it out. But you also have done a great job in a very short time of doing stand-up of building up your name and building up your rep and doing the Lettermans and I think you did Colbert too, didn't you?
Yeah.
And popping your name nationally. So it's not just a Midwest and a Chicago thing. The rest of the country has become aware of you. And obviously a lot of thanks, which you've been very good about, goes to Sebastian Maniscalco, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, Sebastian produced this thing. Without him, it doesn't happen. He put his name on it and is using his platform to kind of bring me along, which is huge because, a lot of the gatekeepers in the comedy world are not the talent,
Oh, absolutely.
So I think that I know that it wouldn't happen without him. And, I've been touring with him the last few years. He's introduced me to his audience. He's promoted me on social media. It's really the most you can do for another comic. So I'm beyond grateful. And it's very cool that, I met him here in Chicago at Zany's when I was house MC there. And we've always stayed in touch through the years. I'd opened for him for one of his Showtime specials. And then, as I mentioned, I've been touring with him the last 3 years and kind of seeing him go from clubs to arenas. I mean, the guy's selling out arenas. So
that's the thing that's so bizarre to me because back in the day, I would open for big acts like Cher or or Mellencamp and Rock Acts and things. And boy, they really don't give a shit about the comedian before the musician. But you're coming out opening.
I'm sure you did fine.
You're coming out and you're opening for the hottest comic in the country. To what? I mean, Madison Square Garden, right? Didn't you do multiple nights there?
Yeah, we did. We did 2 nights there, 4 shows. We did the United Center. I think it's the biggest crowd they ever had for a comedy show. We did the Garden in Boston, the TD Garden, Montreal's arena. I mean, it's crazy. And I miss those days. I really, you look back on it and you appreciate it so much more now, those moments when we could gather and all be together. And really can't wait for that to come back.
Well, there's a much different thing about managing, say, Zanies and Rosemont for $250 or $300, as opposed to making 25,000 laugh. So, how do you stay in your head when you go out to do your act, or do you have to adapt it and make it bigger? Like Sebastian's very physical. There's a lot of arms and legs and things, and I'm sure there's video screens.
Yeah, he's. You are so right. You're dead on. Yeah, he's like an acrobat, and the video screens help a ton. And I've gone up into the rafters when he's on, just to see how does comedy really translate in an arena.
Right.
And if anyone can really pull it off, it's him. He connects so well because of that physical nature. For me, it's a little bit more of I'm not used to even pacing that much. So when we do the arenas, it's in the round. That's the first thing that's different. You're surrounded by people rather than, facing them. It's definitely different, but, I don't want to act like it's second nature now because we've done a bunch of them, but you kind of do adjust, and it's not going to be the same as an intimate club, but I do enjoy it more actually than I thought I would. I think the arena comedy has been, those shows they've been amazing. People are so fired up to see him. I mean, These people, they've been waiting months. These are like Christmas presents, anniversary gifts. People are so fired up.
Does it hurt you that you're not Italian? Is that problematic? Did you have to go through any sort of painful hazing?
Yes, so different. No, his fans have been very accepting, and they, I talk kind of similar to him is in ways of raising a family, being married, just some observational stuff. So they seem to take to me as well. They're nice. I'm
fascinated by the process because playing a room like that, I don't know how you don't work the first 10 or 15 rows, but you gotta work the whole building, right?
Yeah, really. I mean, you can't do crowd work like
right.
You wouldn't in a club.
Anybody travel from a long way?
Exactly. And that's what's been cool about this experience being with him and doing these larger venues is it really forces me to develop material versus, something that I used to do when I was hosting at Danny's and doing my own shows where I would kind of do some crowd work and, riff a little bit with some people, and connect in a different way. So I enjoy that part of it, just kind of being like, just leaning on and relying on the material because that's really what you got to do.
So let's talk about how hard it is to be funny during COVID. Since I got back to doing this podcast regularly, you start to get into some rhythms again, and there are laughs out there, and they're not just about Trump. But there is funny out there. But have you struggled at all with writing during this period?
Yes, definitely, because you're just kind of everyone's feeling, anxiety and. You get down on, some days. That's all natural. I think everyone's kind of going through that. For comics, like I know everyone's got it rough, and this thing has interrupted people in different ways. It's been a definite interruption to live entertainment in that world. So, some days you're not feeling the most creative or most excited because you don't really have anything on the calendar. I've been saying because people are like, oh, I bet you're writing a lot. It's like, yeah, I'm writing a ton. I got a great new bit about crying in my basement. And just drinking until the pain goes away.
Yeah, the day drinking bit. I love that junk.
That's my new super relatable bit. No, there's definitely some things you can tackle because it's also like a huge shared experience too, right?
Right, but most of us who have made money being funny, we don't do it until we absolutely have to. So unless I'm hearing you wrong, the hard part is the discipline of sitting down and doing it because it's like a test in school. You don't study till you have to.
Exactly. I mean, I've always been kind of a procrastinator. I'm trying to be creative with, I do a podcast as well, and I'm doing, trying to stay in touch with, people on social media. But the other side of it is you're not doing live shows. And I had kind of gotten to a point where I used to write all the time and develop things in a notebook. And then I really started to just develop things on stage.
Right.
And record sets and then listen to them and then tinker with it. So not doing those live shows is kind of like not having your pen and paper, that's kind of where I was doing it. So now you got to go back to kind of, getting in that notebook, and then it's just hard to develop things.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because I assume as much as your kids love you, there's some stuff they're rejecting. Dad, that doesn't work.
Exactly.
What about Zoom? I've done a few Zoom shows. Are you doing those?
Yeah, I'm doing a few of those. But even there, it's like harder to develop like a bit, right? It's kind of like you do jokes, shorter stuff. But those are actually, they're fun. Make me feel like I'm actually doing something. Sure.
And bring it back to family here for a second with your 3 kids. I would assume, since they're not used to having you at home, the other part of that equation is one of them more than the other 2 must be sucking up to you to get their way. Which one of those do you want to out?
That's a good question. It depends on the day. It depends on the wants and needs. But, I have my daughter. She's the oldest. And then we got 2 boys. Now, my daughter will kind of, she's older. So she kind of, she's a girl. She knows how to work me a little bit.
Sure, of course. Yeah. And that's cute and delightful and incredibly frightening.
Exactly.
So
good to see how manipulative they can all be.
All right, let's get some plugs in before we run out of time. Your little guy's the toughest guy ever who, as a family, you were battling the worst possible news you can get, that your son is fighting a tumor. Give us a health update and a charity that you've helped that we should know about.
Well, Elliot is doing great. Thank you for, what, Steve, you always have been great about following up and checking in on him. And when we were going through it, you would, you were using your platform to help so much. And he's doing great. He's in remission for a couple of years now. He had leukemia. And, we're kind of, the one foundation that his oncologist was leading, he folded the tent on that.
Oh, he did?
Became too much. Yeah. He's a full-time doctor, and it was just too much. He has young children himself. So, I've aligned myself with a bunch of different foundations. We do things with Ronald McDonald House. We do things with Lurie's and, Christmas Without Cancer. And
so anything related, these things related to pediatric cancer are wonderful organizations, obviously, St. Jude's, things of that nature. And as I always tell people, charitynavigator.org is a great way to vet any charity you're considering donating to anyway. All right, you mentioned a podcast. What's your podcast called?
It's called All Over the Place. And I do it with Jim Flanagan. Yeah, it's like, we're just random. It's just a random conversation. I do it with my buddy Jim Flanagan.
He's a funny guy. He's a funny guy.
He's a good dude. Tell
him I said hello.
I will, man.
And finally, one more plug on the special. What is it? Where is it? And how do we get it?
It's called When's Mom Gonna Be Home? It's on Amazon, Apple TV, YouTube. You could stream it on your toaster, Steve. You can get it on your microwave.
Well, it's fantastic.
I always make fun of my kids. Like, I'll take devices away from them, and then they're like streaming stuff on an appliance. Right.
The smart appliances, sure. Honey, why are you standing by the refrigerator? I'm tweeting.
Exactly.
Life was easier with a legal pad. Well, I love you, man. You're just thrilled with your success, and I know that there's nothing but more of that to come with Sebastian, without Sebastian, and wherever you go and whatever you do. And I hope you'll come back on live from my office.
Always, man. I love you too, buddy. I appreciate you. You've always been in my corner, and I'm glad we got to talk. Miss talking to you.
And anytime you want to see Pat, he is available right now, and he needs to leave the house. So.
That's right. That's true.
All right, buddy. Thank you. I know you got to jump. I'll be in touch.
All right, Steve. Thanks, man.
See ya.
Bye.
Talking about reverse mortgages with David Hochberg. Why does this get a bad rap? I mean, can you really trust these loans?
Here's the deal. My mom was in a wheelchair. She had MS. We converted the living room into her bedroom, bought a hospital bed in there because she couldn't get up and down the stairs. We built the ramp so her mobile wheelchair there could go up and down the stairs.
Sure.
It got to a point where the only asset that my parents had was the house they were living in. So I kept telling them we need a reverse mortgage. We need a reverse mortgage. They're like, no, I hear bad things about it. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm in the industry. These are great loans. Paid for the appraisal, paid for the counseling, which we now have a company that we work with that gets grant from HUD, so you don't have to pay for it. Long story short, I was going to put my parents into a reverse mortgage, Steve, if their house appraised for what my dad thought the house was worth. I did everything that I could possibly do to get my parents set up to take out this product. Do you really think I'm going to put my parents into a product that's dangerous, a loan product?
Exactly.
Hell no.
But here's the thing, because you hit on it, and I don't want people to lose this. There's all this information out there, and then there's the myths that are out there. And the myths that are out there is, well, that's how they get you. That's what my dad would always say about stuff. That's how they get you. That's how they get you. That's how they get your house. They're not taking your house.
It gives you the option. You get a mortgage statement, like any other mortgage statement, and you have the option to make the payment or defer the payment. Okay, a lot of individuals, experienced homeowners, has the option. You're going to get a mortgage statement. You're a grown person. You've made financial decisions all your life. You could either take that money that you would have set aside for the mortgage payment to make your mortgage payment and work your principal down, or you could take that money and go on the bus. Well, you can't go on the bus anymore because nobody's going on the bus, but I used to use this example. Get on the bus and go downtown with your friends from the community center, go see a play.
Right.
Maybe buy a plane ticket and go see your family. Just what do you worry about paying a house off that's already paid off or almost paid off when you could eliminate that payment and live out the rest of your life?
By the way, we'll remind you, whenever we talk to Mr. Hochberg, it's easy to get a hold of him. All you got to do is pick up the phone and call 855-56-DAVID or 56david.com. This is live from my office. One of the cool things about doing a podcast now, well, there's many, but one of them is I don't have to go into an office with someone called program director and have them look at me and go, well, why did you do that? Why did you put this on? Why did you talk to your friends? Oh, that's right. I have friends, great friends through the years, and I am pleased to bring on one of my better friends in life who, the cool thing, and I think he'll agree with this, the cool thing about being a dude, even if you're not talking once a month, once every 6 months, a couple of guys can pick up the phone and go right back to where they were the last time they talked and catch up, and nobody's offended. It's always good to say, here's my friend Ed Mann. Hi, Ed.
Hey, remember when we had that drink in 1986? Wasn't that fun?
I remember the last time you were in Chicago. We went to dinner somewhere. That seemed like a good time.
Yeah. That was fun, and I remember that like it was yesterday, like you just said. It's the funniest thing. What I loved about you, Steve, when you're on the radio at the GN is, and like I didn't announce I was coming into town. I'd be walking down Michigan Avenue. I'd press my face up against the glass. They're like, oh, shit, is that? Oh, my God.
But
Pretty
you're
fun.
a great guest. You're the only guy that is, and I mean this with all sincerity, because you and I know there's not a lot of big brains left in radio. We'll get to that. But you are, I've told you this forever, you're a performer first at heart. You made a lot of money as an entrepreneur. You're a management a genius. You get it. But you're a great guest and you're a performer, whether it's on stage, doing jazz clarinet with you and your crazy friends.
Both trumpet, but that's cool. But yeah, I mean, I've always had that in mind. I just had this conversation with Mindy, my wife, last night. This was so funny that you bring this up. When I was at school, I went to UCLA, and I was an economics major because my parents kind of made me be that.
Okay.
What is this music you want to do? I'm like, well, I like that. People actually can do well at it. No, you need to study the business and the economics. And I said, all right. And of course, on the side, all I did was play music and, work at the radio station at UCLA. But she said, well, why didn't you sort of get into banking and all the other things? I mean, isn't that what economics, you end up in banking? I said, Mindy, I hated those guys. Right. I couldn't stand them. They were these drips. They were horrible.
Right.
They were all like, let's take that company apart and get vested interest in this merger. I'm like,
right.
I had no desire. It's like, yeah, you could probably make more money doing that. But I wanted to be a, $4 an hour disc jockey. And my parents, of course, were like, what in the world are you thinking? After going to that school, I'm like, well, maybe I'll be the smart DJ.
Right.
I'll be the guy that's not dumb. And as it turns out, it kind of worked out. It worked out to be a really, really fun career. Still is.
So as a disc jockey, and by the way, you'll notice that Ed's voice is much deeper than mine.
I use a machine.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But as a disc jockey, I don't even know the answer to this. What was your last true disc jockey gig? Where were you working?
That was K-Big, which was at the time an AC station, adult contemporary station in Los Angeles. And I was doing a show that could be kindly called an interview program, but more, derisive terms, abusive psychic program. It was, I would go on and play some music and introduce songs typically, and then I'd bring on a psychic, and some guy would come on and make wild predictions to callers who would call in. Turns out the program director was this kook who really believed this stuff. And of course, I just never got that. I thought, okay, there's people who are more intuitive than others, but, you're going to tell me, what my kid's going to look like in 20 years?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. So I bring them on, I'd sit there and roll my eyes, and this went on for maybe about 6 to 9 months. And then finally I had enough. And I called the program director. I said, I really got to go. And he says, well, actually, it turns out a week from now, we're turning that time slot into Disco Saturday Night. I said, well, you know what? Now I'm really going to quit. Now it's time for me to really go. And my last shift was that weekend. And I said goodbye to the radio audience, not tearfully, but sort of happily, and drove home. And that was the end of it. And that was 1996.
So it's not easy for guys who have the performer's brain to segue into the business side of show business, but you did it pretty seamlessly. What do you attribute that to?
Really happenstance, and it kind of came about just through associations. I mean, being a DJ, as you know, can sometimes be, if you're not doing mornings or afternoons, sometimes it can get pretty dull. You're just announcing records, and sometimes there's 3 in a row, and click a button, and that's the end of it. And you're doing crossword puzzles. There was a guy whom we both know, Big Ron O'Brien, was a big time DJ. He was at WCFL in Chicago, Des Moines, and of course he came out to Los Angeles. And I used to watch him all the time because we worked together at KISS FM, which was, the larger station I worked for in LA. And he would sit there and so bored, he didn't like the music, first of all. So he'd turn on K-Rock, which was the alternative station, sit there and jam to that. When a light came on to tell him to change songs and do something, he'd wait to the last second, put down his crossword puzzle, flip it on to the, off the audition channel so he could hear what was really going on in his own radio station, do his little rap, 102.7 KISS FM, and now it's Madonna, and hey, it's Madonna. And then go back to K-Rock and his crossword puzzles. And I thought, is that my future? Is that what I'm going to do?
Right.
So I sat around with a bunch of guys, Tim Kelly, Steve Lehman, Luis Palanker, all of whom were basically either writing or on the air. And we thought there's got to be something better to do. And one of them was already doing syndication. And we all sort of jumped in the pool. That's the very short version.
And that turned into a company called Premier Radio, which has made $1 gazillion. Why did you leave them?
Well, my contract was up for 1. 2, I'd been there for 11 years. 3, sometimes you just get a feeling that you can do this on your own, that you don't really need a larger company. And 4, the company was being sold. So it seemed to me that, I didn't really want to work, a lot of A's and D's. I didn't want to work for a larger company. I really like being an entrepreneur. So, and that's really, that was the really main deal. I felt enough of a base to go out and do something on my own like this. We started Premier, and Premier's gone off to, be a completely different organization. And I'm still doing what I was doing back then, working really fun radio programs, small and large, services, stuff like that, stuff that radio really needs. And God knows radio really needs stuff. And it's fun. I'm still having a ball with it. Great fun.
And you're in the podcast business as well. We'll get to that. And we're also going to get to a book that Ed has written, which summarizes what he and I owe a lot to, and that's radio. But let's talk about radio for a second. In Chicago, which I would still argue is the greatest talent market in radio over the course of modern history,
always has been. Yep.
It's a complete wasteland. And you would think that a town that produced, and obviously present company excluded, you and me, we know where we are on the list. But guys like Lou Jack and Dahl and Brandmeier and all the Loop guys, and that's just scratching the surface. There's almost nobody left, and I assume LA is the same way.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of the personalities have been diluted. You have guys like JoJo, Seacrest, guys that made it here in Los Angeles, being farmed out, and there's a lot of what they call voice tracking. So when you hear them in other places, they're not there, and they're coming from either LA or New York, some other markets, Houston, and that's just not the way it's supposed to be, in my opinion. Now,
right.
Who am I to say? I'm a syndicator, syndicating voices out to stations that don't have the guy really there, on the plan. But there's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. And I really believe that a lot of larger radio companies do this in a way that does not localize. You don't get the feel of somebody who cares for the local market. And when we do something on a syndicated basis, we really work hard to make sure that happens. I don't think everyone does that. Now, I'm not patting myself on the back, but yeah, getting back to your original question, I think the talent base that was here in LA is diluted just as it has in Chicago.
And I talked to somebody who's one of the main, there's only about 3 or 4 big companies left that own the majority of everything. And I talked to one of those guys, and he was lamenting the fact that there's no farm team anymore. Well, there's no farm team because unlike when you and I came up, where you had to work in a particular market, you had to get good, and then you'd send out tapes, and then you'd go to another market, and you'd work your way up the ladder. Those reps matter, and those reps aren't happening anymore. And God bless these kids that are getting jobs, but you got kids that are working in local television and radio in major cities like Chicago and LA and New York as well, who, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, 20 years ago wouldn't have been hired as an intern. And that dilutes the product.
Not wrong. That's absolutely not incorrect. I've seen weather people on television news here, even during the week, who just don't belong in broadcasting. It's like, right. What are you doing here? You're standing in the way of the weather report, you're getting too close to the camera. I mean, all the very basic things in television they do wrong. In radio, the levels are all off. They mispronounce everything. It's like it's just the basic stuff. They hadn't got it down. Yeah, reps are important. Got to spend those years in some smaller markets figuring it out. Listening a lot. Listening is everything. If you're not listening to the greats, you're not going to be close to them. You're just not going to get there.
So, Northern California radio as well, and San Francisco is a great talent market. I mean, the whole country as I do as well in radio. So let's reminisce a little bit. I'm going to give you a day part. You tell me your favorite person ever to do that day part. Let's go backwards. Let's start with nights, evenings.
Wow. I'm going to have to go with John Landecker at WLS.
100%. Greatest disc jockey ever.
I mean, he was just unbelievable. And then, of course, he segued to afternoons and how mornings will be doing, or has done mornings recently now. Back to nights, I guess, at WGN.
Yep.
But when he was a jock doing music, there was no one more musical than that guy. He would not sing along necessarily with the songs, but he knew every beat of every record and every chord, and it would all come out in his delivery, and still never lost the communication with the audience.
Well, people don't understand how hard that is, how hard it is to be entertaining in 15 to 30 second clips. And he was super smart. So it wasn't, everybody talks about Boogie Check, the bit that he did every night where he would take phone calls and just mess with people. But he had really, you remember Bullwinkle, the cartoon, where Bullwinkle was great for kids, but adults would laugh at the jokes? That was John. John, as a disc jockey, would always have something for the smart part of the audience.
Yep. And that's what attracted me to radio. I sat in on John's show in 1980, back when I was really trying to decide whether or not I was going to do this or not. And I had heard WLS in LA because it had that bounce. You can actually hear certain radio stations all over the country at night. And I heard Yvonne Daniels, who was wonderful. And may she rest in peace. And I had a girlfriend in Chicago at the time, and we took some time off to go to LS. And she introduced me around. And John waved me in and says, sit in the show for a bit. And that sold me. I was like, this guy's too funny, and he's too smart. And and he was doing really well, and the station was on fire, and I just thought, this is for me. And I met Lou Jack on the way out. It was just wonderful. And Chicago radio still, it's my favorite town for radio. Always has been.
You mentioned Lou Jack. That's my favorite afternoon guy. And everybody just remembers Larry Lou Jack that knows Larry's name from doing mornings all those years. He was a phenomenal afternoon guy because there was nobody like him.
Right. And it was the funniest thing I saw Lou Jack do way back when. And this is going for the older part of your audience. They used to do things called like DJ challenges on game shows on TV.
Yeah, right.
They'd have, you remember that? And they'd have like, which DJ can rap the fastest? Mm-hmm. Which DJ can, get to, hit the post the fastest? I mean, all this really esoteric stuff that most people wouldn't care about. For some reason, it was entertaining as hell. And the guys that could get the fastest rap going, for some reason, they put Lou Jack in with that group. So he did not talk fast, Lou Jack. So they had him in with, Dancing Danny Wright and Fast Talking Freddie and all these guys. And they go, okay, Larry, go ahead. He's like, I'm miserable. He couldn't talk fast.
Right.
Couldn't do it. So I was just on the floor. He would laugh. He was like, this is ridiculous. I can't do this. Because Larry would talk like this. Hey, little Tommy, how you doing? You pictured Larry with a cigar in his mouth and his feet up on the desk. And you never thought of him as a fast-talking DJ. But there he was on national television in front of 15 million people competing.
Right.
It was so bizarre. And I just had to laugh out loud. Because at that time, I knew Larry. And I thought, this is really stupid.
All right, now here's a tough one. What about middays? The midday shows around the country. I mean, your job was always as a disc jockey, entertain the people at work. Link the mornings to the afternoon. But again, you're not doing a lot of freestyling, and I struggle just and this is off the top of my head here, as it is with you. But I struggle with coming up with a singular midday talent. Have you got one?
I do, and it's someone I work with, because I'm a little biased, but I listened to him for so many years before I got there, and that's Paul Freeman at KISS FM.
Oh, he's great.
And
it's great.
Paul was great. Paul started out in Orange County, and by the time he got to KISS, and he was there for something like 17 years. And the thing about Paul is you always pictured a guy, kind of a deep voice guy, and he announced records like this. He sounded almost like the chairman of the board.
Right.
And, you picture a narrow tie and, narrow lapels and his hair slicked back and, presenting the songs right now, right this way, folks. And I thought, that just locks it in for me, man.
Right.
Not really humorous, the humor's in person. He was hilarious, but he never did that on the air. He never told a joke that I can recall. And that's what you want from middays in most part. You want a guy who can just seamlessly bring it together from mornings to afternoons, play lots of music and make it sound important. And that to me is what Paul did.
And I'll give you one that's not a disc jockey, but he could have been. And that's a WGN legend, a guy named Roy Leonard, who interviewed every star in the country, because when they would come through town, they'd insist on doing Roy Leonard's show. They didn't have to get up too early. He had a massive audience, and he conducted phenomenal celebrity interviews. And to the day he died a few years ago, he was still one of the cooler guys in the room. It's always funny when you see somebody that's got a little bit of their gray hair left, and they're clearly an older person, and they greet you with, "Hey, man, what's happening?" And he was that guy. He was that guy. All right, now mornings, this is like talking sports. If you talk about the greatest morning radio talents ever, it's almost by era, and everybody could default to Howard Stern because he changed everything. Your local morning shows are your legends in radio in your particular towns. But I'll give you a name which won't surprise you necessarily, but this is a guy who meant a lot to me when I was coming up in the business, and I had a chance to meet him on a couple occasions, and he could not have been a bigger prick. I'm talking about Don Imus.
Oh, my God. Oh, my goodness. Oh, yeah. For those who don't remember Imus, well, he was on television for so many years.
Right.
He did his wacky show and tell. Yeah, he was groundbreaking.
Yep.
As much as Howard Stern would make fun of him, I mean, he really broke that ground.
Yep.
And allowed Howard to be Howard. And then of course Howard turned right around, and started attacking Don.
Right.
Right. But Imus really broke that ground and doing just the wackiest stuff. I mean, and so funny, so intelligent.
And what does it say about me that I was attracted to Lou Jack and Imus a couple of grumpy pricks, even though Larry actually was a nice enough guy if you got him off the radio. But
and excuse me, Steve, but what was that movie you were in?
That grumpy old pricks. That's right. Yeah.
There you go.
That was it.
All right.
All right, but give me your favorite morning guy.
Besides Steve Cochran.
Yeah, besides.
I can't think of one.
You must have been a
Howard comes right to the top. I mean, I still listen to Howard, and my son and I have now got a bonding thing with Howard. We sit around and listen to him, and he just kills me. Yeah. How fast he is at this age, in his mid-60s, later than that, 67, and he's destroying it. I mean, crushing it. Just the longevity of it alone is unbelievable. And to speak, as you know, to talk 4 or 5 hours a day and with no music and hardly any commercials.
Yep.
Holy cow, man. That's just unreal. So I'm sorry. Howard's at the top of that list.
Yeah, there's no question. And he is the guy, if you could learn anything about entertainment, traditional radio, podcasting, whatever, certainly television, acting, be as honest as your demons want you to be, because he has never tried to hide for a minute the darkest, weirdest places in his head. And that's what, that's what attracted people.
The only thing I think he's tried to hide over the last 10 years or so is his first marriage. And I think that might be that maybe to protect his children. He doesn't want to insult his ex-wife.
Yep.
He doesn't want to irritate her, and he doesn't want to irritate his present wife. So I think that's probably a wise move. Leave her out of things. You know, he spent many years talking about her already, and that's fine. And that's the only exception I can think of for Howard. He will talk about any bodily function he performs. He will perform some of those bodily functions on the air, and he'll make it sound hilarious. And he's also probably the best guest on television.
Yeah, he is.
There's no one funnier.
Because really he stresses it beyond belief. Now, your father-in-law, Don Rickles, was maybe the greatest talk show guest ever as a panelist. But
no question.
And he was a natural. Howard wasn't a natural with that. He admits it to today. He stresses beyond belief because he wants to bring entertainment. And, I've talked to my son about this, who's in the business as well. It's like, never take an audience for granted, whether I'm doing stand-up or whatever. I don't care if there's 2 people there or 2,000 or in Don's case, 2 million. The audience paid. The audience paid, whether it's in their time or their money. Give them a show. And Don obviously always got that. And Howard worked very hard to get it, which is why they were great in a different way.
Yep. I got to throw a couple of other names out there, particularly for afternoons, which we haven't really touched yet. But, 3 big names come to mind, and these are names that might resonate with people around the country. The real Don Steele.
Oh, tremendous. Tremendous.
He would say four words, and you were entertained out of your mind. It was how did he just...
The radio station in L.A., was it 10Q?
He was at 10Q before that, most famously, and made famous further by Quentin Tarantino in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at 93 KHJ.
That's it.
And he was spectacular. His widow, Sean, and I remain friends. She's a UCLA Bruin like me, and we talk all the time, and she's been saying nice things about my book. But the thing is about Steele is that I worked with him at Premier Radio. He would come in like, John Voight with the scarf, big as life like John Wayne. Hey, babies, and you're like, oh my God, Steele's in the room. And he was deaf as a doornail, so they'd had to turn up the headphones in the studio. He had a special amp. I couldn't even get in the room, much less put the headphone set on. It was so loud. Poor guy was deaf as could be, but that's just the way he wanted to do it, and that's the way he went out, deaf as a doornail.
You talked about the 4 words. All I remember from some of my favorite tapes of listening to guys coming up was the real Don Steele going, the new 10Q. And it was the greatest thing you ever heard.
Right.
4 words.
Greatest thing I've ever heard. All you have to do is say those 4 words. Yeah. Bobby Ocean of KFRC in San Francisco. Sure. Growing up in the Bay Area, that was the guy. He sounded like he had a surfboard under his feet and just was speaking into a microphone from the beach. You just had that sound. He had that cool thing going. And finally, a guy I grew up with when I was a little kid on Long Island, New York, I listened to WABC, and it was Dan Ingram. And Dan, no one sounded as relaxed, smooth, crazy, and messy as Dan Ingram. Yep. It was just a wreck of a show. In fact, he called it the Ingram mess. But at the end of the day, he was phenomenally successful and entertaining. So those guys.
Yeah,
Those are my guys.
I should mention too, and a Chicago legend, but a national legend with just a gigantic audience. A guy named Wally Phillips, who could not have been more socially awkward. He was just one of those guys who could perform on the air, but off the air, he just was completely uncomfortable. Married this, I think I have this right. He married the same woman 3 different times, so that's a special kind of different. But what he did, because we're talking about an era, he was mostly the big star of the 60s and 70s, and what he did in a room. Commercials were played off actual vinyl records. There were record turners in the room. There were engineers. There were news writers for news readers. I mean, a radio show like that at that point probably had 50 to 100 people working on it. And he paid the bills because he was gigantic. But to jockey everything you need to do in your head before you turn that microphone on, and to be able to, I mean, he ran a circus. He really did. And he was the ringmaster. And I wish I had seen him perform live, because I only knew him a little bit late in life. But that type of thing is hard for me to imagine.
I can't imagine getting married 3 times to the same woman.
Oh, that's probably the bigger part of the story. All right, this all brings us to your book. Your book, which is out and available when?
It has been available now for a month. It's we're still basically in our little launch period before people get really sick of me online promoting it almost every day. And it's called For the Love of Radio, available on my website, fortheloveofradiobook.com.
Okay.
Or on Amazon.
And I will social that out for folks as well. For the Love of Radio, give me the premise.
The premise is a guy who is attracted to the media business and succeeds truly in spite of himself. He just constantly gets in his own way. And as the river sort of pushes him downstream, is just one rocky, set of rapids after another that he has to negotiate. So, a lot of wild conflicts with women. Everything he thinks is going to go well doesn't. And at the end of the day, gets a set of competing pieces of advice from friends and celebrities about how to even deal with the women in his life. And ends up with one that he had met many years before, when he was just a young man, before he had even gone anywhere with this thing. But he's a radio guy at heart, and allowed media sort of take over his life and women to abuse him.
So, yeah,
so it's,
right.
It's a women's empowerment.
And I want people to get the book, so I don't want you to give away the ending yet. But here's the deal. You must have worked in some stories from your own career, amalgamations of people, compilations of things you've seen. Is any of that in there?
What's really fun for people who purchase the book who know me, is like trying to figure out which is the real part and which isn't. And I always get a laugh out of that. It's like, well, I guess you don't know me so well if you don't know which part's fake or not. But it started out as a series of stories that I just simply wrote down in a start. Like within 6 months, I had 300 pages of just all the crap I'd gone through over the years.
Wow.
And I thought, this is great. This is so fun. And I showed it to people. They're like, no, it's not. It makes no sense. It's just like, what happened to that station? And why did you suddenly end up here? And I thought, oh, boy. So I ran into an editor through a recommendation. And she said, you got 2 choices. You can either make this a true story, kind of narrow it down and do something really salacious and really reveal what, this guy was really like, or why was this guy such a jerk? And, what was the story behind that? And do some reveals. And I thought, well, I'm not like Kitty Kelly or, National Enquirer. I'm not going to be doing that stuff. And I'm in the business. I mean, that'd be suicide. She goes, well, then you need to make it a novel. Just change the names, change some of the stories, and make them all sort of fit, into sort of a contiguous story, which, sounds easy when you say it, but it really took a lot of years. And I had to discard a lot of really what I thought were great stories, throw them aside, and just go with the story. How does it start? How did he end up getting into radio? How did he get, this crazy success? And then how does it all sort of collapse on him?
Is there a sequel?
You know what? I've been writing an epilogue for this.
Okay.
And then my son, Ethan, looked at me and goes, Dad, you can't do an epilogue from a novel. It's BS. No one, that didn't happen. And then this didn't happen either. You know, it's like, here's two things that didn't happen. It's like, you know, you're right. You know, so, but I am working on a new one. It also has a radio thing to it, but it's a little more of a thriller. So I'm excited about that.
Well, I'm proud of you, man. It's hard to write a book. It's phenomenally hard to write a book. How do I know? I got about 40. I haven't finished.
You know, you start them, you write them, you go, and you're like, oh, well, the phone rang, and then you can't do it anymore that night because, you know, something else happened. Well, it's really hard to find.
I'm proud of you, man. I'm impressed. It's, again, for the loveofradiobook.com, right?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. And you get the choice of the paperback or the Amazon, like I'll bring you to the ebook.
And when I finish it, you'll have my full and vicious review, which I will send to you.
Scathing.
I got to ask you about Mindy. Mindy Rickles is a very, very funny woman that Ed married, and your two wonderful sons as well. But Mindy, once this all clears up, she'll be back on stage?
Oh, yeah. I mean, she still works on stuff all the time, and she debates herself, oh, geez, is this going to work? And so I help her with a lot of material, which I really love to do. You know, I like to write, you know, so we work on stuff all the time. And we figure if it makes us laugh, it's in. You know, if it doesn't, you know, maybe run it by someone else, but if they don't laugh either, forget about it. Right. But if it makes us, we kind of know where she's funny, you know, what is funny with her. So we make sure that happens and that element is part of everything we write together. And then she sometimes takes stories out of real life. You know, comedy now is mostly just stories.
Yep.
Punchlines are kind of passé. So just tell the story. And if it's a funny story, they're going to dig it.
It's funny. You sort of mentioned something that comes down to comedic journalism. Get two sources, and if they both think it's funny, go with it. There's a certain landmine to that, but I like it. I may try it again. I'm not too old for that.
No, what? Never. You know, you can do comedy at any age. I don't care what they say. You know, it's just do it. If you're funny, you're funny. Look at my father-in-law. He was working until he was 90 years old. You know, and it wasn't just because he was famous; it was because he was funny. And you know, they kept going.
Yeah, and we'll be back on stage in Chicago and around the Midwest, too, once this little COVID thing goes away. Listen, man, I love you. You know that, and it's so good catching up with you. For the loveofradio.com.
For the loveofradiobook.com.
That's exactly what you said. For the loveofradiobook.com. And
that's exactly what you said. Yeah, that's right.
And all right, we'll catch up again. You don't mind doing this again for me, do you? Maybe coming on occasionally, because it seems like you and I have chemistry.
We have a lot of fun with it. You know, it's like it's the chemistry set that explodes in the backyard. You know, it's like when you take the magnesium out, it's like, whoops, that's the kind of chemistry we have. So that's what happens. I would love to do it, Steve. Let's make this a regular thing. That'd be great.
It's my friend Ed Mann, and you're listening live from my office. Welcome back to Live from My Office. I'm Steve Cochran, and this is the moment in each episode where I talk about a charitable organization. And by the way, thecochranshow@gmail.com is a great place for you to drop me a note about a charity you're looking for some publicity for. Maybe it's one you support, one that you've heard me talk about, one that I've never talked about you think we ought to know about. Drop me a note. I'll do a little due diligence, and we'll go from there. In the meantime, today's charitable organization is firehero.org. If you've paid any attention at all and you're not listening to this on the West Coast, you know the West Coast is on fire. It's way beyond fire season now, which is something Californians in particular put up with every year. Climate change is real, kids, and climate change has made this situation much, much worse. Oregon is having just massive fires. California going through losing homes and lives again. It's just tragic. So firehero.org is an organization that exists to honor firefighters. And in particular, the mission is to honor and remember America's fallen fire heroes and to help their families in rebuilding their lives, but also to work within the fire service community to shut down firefighter deaths and injuries as much as possible, because firefighters, like officers of the law, go to work every day and they don't know if they're coming home. So I hope you'll support firehero.org. That's the website, firehero.org. They're doing a lot of amazing things, and you can check them out at firehero.org. We will see you again next time on Live from My Office. Got a big week coming up next week, including the very funny, on-point author P.J. O'Rourke. I think it's his 20th book. He'll be joining us next week along with many other fabulous guests. A couple. And words from me as well as the election approaches. We're going to get into how to vote, how to research how to vote, and hit you with some specifics. On social media, it's Cochran Show on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, where the Trump dump continues. Every day, another highlight where Trump did something that you may have forgotten. Why am I pounding it home on a day-to-day basis? Not to torture you, but to remind you how much we have got to change the resident of the White House. And that's on Twitter, at Cochran Show. Also, you can follow me on LinkedIn, at Cochran Show. Instagram, it's Steve Cochran Show. So follow me on social media if you will. In the meantime, thank you again to Pat McGann. Get that special. It's on demand right now, and it's well worth your time and your laughs. And boy, couldn't we all use another laugh or two. And by the way, Ed Mann, my friend Ed Mann, he'll be back. I didn't announce it, but I've made him the ambassador for this podcast to California. He is our California bureau chief as of right now. And thanks to my son, Ross Cochran, for putting all this together as always. But mostly thanks to you for listening to Live from My Office.
Live from My Office is a service of Monkey Run Productions. All rights reserved. The podcast is hosted by Steve Cochran, and it's mixed, edited, and produced by me, Ross Cochran. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, and follow Steve on all social media channels. Get in touch with us directly with questions or comments about the show by emailing mecochranshow@gmail.com. Steve is available for corporate speaking gigs. He would love to MC your event, and occasionally, he's funny. Thank you for listening. Head to cochranshow.com for more.